I want to start with a number today because it's the number that changes everything once you understand it. If your testosterone comes back somewhere between 250 and 400, there's a good chance your provider told you that's normal, or may have even conceded that's a little low. And statistically, it probably is. But normal and optimal, again, guys, are not the same thing. At Pinnacle, we believe a person can age with continued vigor, vitality, and a high level of function. Now, many healthy young men naturally fall in the upper half of the established range, often somewhere around 600 to 1,000, though there are significant individual variations. A level of 250 to 400 may be inside that reference range, but may fall well below where most men feel and function at their best, and we're calling that normal. I'm here to tell you why that framing can fail you. I'm not interested in whether you're technically inside a reference range. I'm interested in whether your hormones match how you're feeling. And today I want to walk through why this gets missed for so long, what's actually happening in your body as testosterone declines, and the benefits of getting it back where it belongs. Plus the information that has scared men away from one of the more important hormones that they have. This is Pep Talks with Stu, and today we're talking more in depth about the effects of decreasing testosterone, thorough evaluation, appropriate testosterone replacement, and the benefits of optimizing hormone levels. So why does this get missed? Here's the core of the problem. As guys, we tend to largely gauge our testosterone by how we perform sexually, including libido and erectile function. And as long as that's working, we assume the tank is full. But for a lot of men, those aren't the first things to change. Symptom patterns do vary, and some men do notice libido early, but many men experience fatigue, brain fog, and reduced motivation well before any sexual symptoms show up. The earliest signs of testosterone declining are often quieter, and they're easy to blame on the rest of life. Low energy, fatigue that sleep or caffeine doesn't touch, brain fog, and maybe the most telling one, a slow erosion of motivation and drive. The projects you used to chase, the workouts you used to crave, the edge you used to have, it starts to dull. And because it happens gradually, sometimes over years, you adapt to it. You call it aging, you call it stress, you call it a busy season of life. Meanwhile, the actual cause can be sitting right there in a blood test that is often being read incompletely. So let's go back to that normal number, because this is where men get failed. Lab reference ranges flag you as low only if you drop below the bottom cutoff, which depending on the lab sits somewhere around 250 to 300. So a man at 300 or 350 or even 400 gets told he's normal and sent home. But I will say this again and again, normal is not always optimal or functional. A reference range is just a statistical band built from the population that walked through the lab. And a lot of that population were aging men who had already lost ground. It tells you whether you're statistically within a population reference range. It does not tell you whether you feel good, perform well, recover well, or have hormone levels that support optimal function. Telling a man that a level near the bottom of the range is normal is technically true, but can be functionally useless. And there's a second layer most people never hear about. The total testosterone number on your report isn't even the entire picture to use. Testosterone travels in your blood in 3 states. A big chunk is bound tightly to a protein called sex hormone binding globulin, or SHBG, and while it's locked up there, your cells can't even touch it. A smaller portion is loosely bound to albumin, and a small free fraction floats completely unbound. The free and the albumin-bound testosterone together are what's actually available to your tissues. That's your bioavailable testosterone. So if your SHBG is high, even a total that looks okay can leave you with very little usable hormone. That's why a person can have a normal looking total number and still feel like the floor's dropped out. So here's something I need you to hear, especially if you've already had your hormones checked. If you had a panel drawn and the only thing anyone looked at was your total testosterone, you were handed about a quarter of the picture and told it was the whole thing. Total testosterone by itself doesn't tell you what's usable, and it doesn't tell you what that testosterone is being converted into. To actually understand a man's hormones, you have to evaluate at least 4 things together: total testosterone, free testosterone, SHBG, and estrogen. Leave any of those out and you're essentially guessing. One number is not a hormone evaluation. It's a single data point pretending to be a full evaluation, similar to saying that a single pixel constitutes an entire picture. So let me explain why estrogen belongs on this list, because this surprises most men. Men need estrogen, not a lot, but a healthy amount, and it matters enormously. A meaningful share of a man's estrogen is made by converting his own testosterone through an enzyme called aromatase. So testosterone and estrogen aren't opponents in a man's body, they're partners. Estrogen is part of how men maintain bone density, protect the heart and blood vessels, support brain function and mood, and even drive libido. So if you only measure total testosterone and never look at your estrogen, you're blind to half of how those hormones are actually working. And it cuts both ways. Some men convert too much testosterone into estrogen, often driven by excess body fat, since fat tissue is where that aromatase activity occurs. That can leave them with a poor testosterone to estrogen ratio and symptomatic. Other men, especially as testosterone falls, end up with estrogen that's too low, and that's its own problem. Low estrogen in men is linked to bone loss, worse cardiovascular risk, joint issues, and a flat mood. You can't know which scenario you're in unless you measure. That's the whole point. The goal isn't crushing estrogen or maxing testosterone, it's getting the full picture and balancing it. So let me say this directly. If you've gone to a provider, described these symptoms, or just told them you feel off, and the answer you got was, well, your labs look fine, you deserve a much more thorough conversation about what was actually evaluated. Ask what was measured. Ask whether it was just total testosterone or whether free testosterone, SHBG, and estrogen were part of it. Feeling off and being told you're fine is one of the most frustrating experiences you can have in healthcare, and you're allowed to push for the full picture. So on that point, I want to tell you something personal here, because I think it matters. I was already working in healthcare when I started noticing my symptoms. Severe fatigue that didn't make sense, almost non-existent drive and motivation, that flat, foggy feeling that I couldn't explain. I hadn't studied hormones at that point, but I knew I didn't feel right. I went to multiple physicians and requested hormone testing, multiple times, and I was turned down repeatedly. The reason? I didn't fit the model. I wasn't elderly. I had good musculature from a lifetime of working out. I was under 30 years old. I wasn't the stereotypical low testosterone patient that the traditional framework was built around. So the testing was refused. I didn't match the profile they were looking for, so they refused to look. Eventually, one physician did agree to run my labs. My total testosterone came back at 87. 87. It was horrible. And I had been told more than once that I didn't need to be tested. That experience is a big part of why I do what I do, because I lived the exact failure that I'm describing. A real person with real symptoms dismissed because they didn't check the right boxes on a demographic form. Symptoms matter, patients matter, and one number is not a hormone evaluation. But in my case, they wouldn't even look at that one number. So if that story resonates with you, keep watching. So what's going on in our body with the decline? What's actually happening inside the body as testosterone falls? This is part of what I really want you to understand, because once you see it, the symptoms stop looking random and start looking connected. Testosterone is a signaling hormone with receptors all over the body, not just in reproductive tissue. It's in your muscle, your bone, your brain, your blood vessels, your fat cells. So when levels drop, the effects show up everywhere at once. In the muscle, testosterone is a key driver of protein synthesis, the process by which your body builds and repairs muscle tissue. When testosterone declines, so does your capacity to synthesize protein efficiently. That means you can train the same, eat the same, sleep the same, and get less back. Lean mass becomes harder to maintain, let alone build. Adaptation slows, recovery slows. The gains that used to come with effort start to stall, and the muscle you've built starts to erode quietly in the background. In the fat tissue, lower testosterone tips the metabolic balance toward fat storage, especially around the midsection. But here's the part that most people never hear. Fat tissue contains aromatase, the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. So as testosterone falls, fat accumulates. As fat accumulates, there's more aromatase activity. More aromatase means more conversion of what testosterone remains into estrogen, and more of that conversion means even less testosterone available. It's a cycle that feeds itself, and it doesn't stop on its own. In the brain is where I really want to spend some time, because I think it's the most underappreciated piece of the whole picture. Testosterone and its downstream metabolites have direct effects on the brain. We're talking about motivation, drive, focus, confidence, and resilience. These are not personality traits. They are, at least in part, neurochemical outputs, and testosterone plays a meaningful role in supporting them. When testosterone is low, men often describe something that goes beyond tired. They describe a flat quality to their experiences, less interest in the things that used to matter, difficulty sustaining focus, a shorter fuse, less willingness to take on challenges, and a quieter, harder to name sense that they are not quite themselves. Low testosterone doesn't just feel like being tired, it feels like becoming a lesser version of yourself. And because it happens gradually, most men don't even know that that's what's happening. They think they've changed. They haven't changed, their chemistry has. In the bone, testosterone maintains bone density through two pathways, directly through testosterone receptors in the bone tissue and indirectly through the estrogen it converts into. Estrogen is actually a critical driver of bone density in men, which is why the testosterone-estrogen relationship matters so much. As testosterone falls and estrogen often falls with it, bone density begins to decline faster than it would otherwise. Over years and decades, that translates to increased fracture risk and a deterioration in overall skeletal health. This is not a concern reserved for elderly women. It's a real physiologic consequence of prolonged hormonal deficiency in men. In the cardiovascular system, testosterone plays a role in endothelial function, the health and responsiveness of the inner lining of your blood vessels. It supports vascular tone and dilation. It also has effects on insulin sensitivity and overall metabolic health. Healthy physiologic testosterone levels are associated with more favorable metabolic and cardiovascular outcomes. And on the flip side, low testosterone has been associated with increased cardiovascular and metabolic risk in multiple studies. This is exactly why one number is not a hormone evaluation. The downstream effects of hormonal imbalance touch every major system in the body. You can't understand what's happening in one area without understanding what's happening in all of them. This can also lead to misdiagnosis. Now I want to connect the dots for a very important point. Low energy, fatigue, no motivation, no drive, add low libido and weaker erections on top. What does that cluster look like on paper? It looks exactly like depression. So this is what can happen. A man goes in describing those symptoms and the conversation moves towards an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication, and his hormones are never checked. Or they are checked and the numbers come back normal but suboptimal, and he's told that it's normal. So the hormonal piece never gets addressed. Hormonal contributors to fatigue, low motivation, and mood symptoms can get overlooked during that evaluation. Now I want to be clear here, depression is real, anxiety is real, and for many people, medication is exactly the right answer. I'm not knocking the use of these medications when appropriate. What I'm saying is that you can't know the full picture until the hormones have actually been looked at. Evaluating the chemistry of mood while never checking the chemistry of hormones is doing part of the workup and calling it complete. Ideally, you look at both. Now, there's a lot of misinformation about testosterone that I want to clear up, particularly the misinformation that have driven fears that have kept men away from fixing this, because most of them are built on outdated or misread science. And I want to be precise with my words here. I'm not going to call these myths, because a myth is just a story floating around. This is misinformation, and it's being actively repeated. There are still providers today telling patients that testosterone causes heart disease and prostate cancer. And when you trace where those claims came from, it's almost hard to believe that we're still saying them. That information is weak at best, and it's keeping men sick. Misinformation number one, testosterone causes heart disease. Here's where this one actually came from. In 2013 and 2014, two studies, one published in JAMA and one in PLOS1, reported higher cardiovascular risk in men on testosterone. The media ran with it worldwide. Doctors stopped prescribing it. The FDA applied a warning on the label in 2015. The problem was both studies were heavily criticized for serious flaws in how the data was collected and analyzed, to the point that there were international calls to retract the JAMA paper. But the fear got planted in a year and a half on headlines built on shaky science. And then the real data came in. Large modern studies, including the Traverse trial, have challenged many of the long-standing fears surrounding physiologic testosterone replacement and significantly improved our understanding of its safety profile. The Traverse trial, published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2023, enrolled over 5,200 men with low testosterone who already had heart disease or were at high risk for it. Testosterone therapy did not increase major cardiac events compared to placebo. The evidence was strong enough that in 2025, following a review of the newer safety data, the FDA removed the cardiovascular warning from testosterone labels while still advising monitoring for other potential risks like blood pressure. Now, to be precise, this does not mean testosterone is a cardiovascular treatment, and I'm not going to frame it that way. But healthy physiologic testosterone levels are associated with more favorable metabolic and cardiovascular outcomes. And on the flip side, low testosterone has been associated with increased cardiovascular and metabolic risk in many studies. So the picture is not what the scare headline suggested. Misinformation number two, testosterone causes prostate cancer. This is where it gets almost unbelievable, because this fear is over 80 years old and we're still quoting it. It traces back to 1941 to a study by Charles Huggins and Clarence Hodges. But here's the detail almost nobody mentions. The conclusion that testosterone makes prostate cancer grow was based on a single patient, one man in 1941, and that one observation became dogma for the better part of a century. The modern research does not support it. In the Traverse trial, there was no increase in prostate cancer in the men receiving testosterone. So the 1941 finding that castration helps advance cancer can be true, while the fear that restoring a deficient man's testosterone causes cancer is not supported by the evidence. Both can coexist, and the saturation model explains it. Here's a finding that should make you rethink the whole story. Several studies have reported associations between lower testosterone levels and more aggressive, higher grade prostate disease, not less. Misinformation number 3, testosterone makes men angry and aggressive. This is the cartoon version, guys, and it's backwards. Wildly superphysiologic abuse is one thing, but appropriate balanced testosterone, along with healthy estrogen that comes with it, actually stabilizes mood. It tends to make men calmer, steadier, and more even, not angrier. The irritability and the short fuse I see in men is far more often a symptom of low testosterone or severely suppressed estrogen than high testosterone. So what are the benefits here? What happens when we stop chasing the bottom of the reference range and get a man back to where his body is built to run? Energy and stamina come back, not jittery caffeine-style energy, but the baseline drive to do things again. The fog lifts, focus, motivation, and that sense of edge return. Mood stabilizes. Men describe feeling like themselves again, steadier and more resilient. Body composition shifts. Lean mass becomes easier to build and hold, and that midsection fat becomes easier to manage, which also slows the aromatase cycle working against you. Bone density is protected, both from testosterone directly and from the estrogen it supports. Cardiovascular and metabolic markers often move in a favorable direction when hormones are restored to a physiologic range rather than left depleted, though this varies between individuals. Libido and sexual function improve, but notice that's on the list, not the headline. It's one benefit among many, not the whole point. The goal isn't a number. The goal is a man who feels and functions at his best. More modern dosing protocols involve testosterone replacement to more frequent dosing for exactly this reason. Weekly injections reduce the amplitude of the peaks and troughs compared to every 2 weeks dosing. Twice weekly dosing reduces that even further. Some protocols use even more frequent administration depending on the individual and the preparation being used. The goal isn't more testosterone. The goal is more stable testosterone. The objective isn't simply to get testosterone into the body. The objective is to create stable physiologic hormone levels that allow a man to feel and function at his best. A protocol that achieves stable levels with a well-tolerated dose will outperform a higher dose administered on a schedule that creates dramatic swings. This is also why ongoing monitoring matters. Testosterone, free testosterone, estrogen, hematocrit, and other markers need to be followed over time. Replacement is not a set it and forget it intervention. It's an ongoing calibration. Now, a word to women. I want to spend a minute here because women have testosterone too, and it matters for energy, libido, mood, and muscle and bone. But the approach is different, and order matters enormously. In women, testosterone is not the first hormone we replace. Estrogen, progesterone, and sometimes thyroid need to be assessed and corrected first. If you add testosterone to a system where those foundational hormones are out of balance, you risk pushing things into an androgen-dominant state, and that creates its own set of problems. So for the women listening, the message is the same in spirit, but different in sequence. Get the full picture, build it in the right order. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Don't let statistically normal be the finish line. Normal just means you cleared the lowest bar. Don't settle for normal or fine. Go after functional. One number is not a hormonal evaluation. If you're tired, foggy, flat, and watching your drive disappear, that's worth a real workup. Total testosterone, free testosterone, SHBG, and estrogen, and thyroid, evaluated together. The full picture, not one number and, labs look fine. Most importantly, you were not built to run at a quarter tank. If this piqued your interest, I'd be happy to have a consultation with you at Pinnacle Performance and Wellness and discuss if your lab results reflect how you're feeling. At minimum, don't be afraid to pursue a deeper conversation with your current provider. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this information. We'll see you next time on Pep Talks with Stu. Have a great day and God bless.